Rain fell in thin silver needles against the windshield, tapping a nervous rhythm that filled the silence of the small security booth. Darren leaned back in his creaking chair, his eyes heavy, a half-empty thermos of coffee cooling beside the flickering monitors. It was past 2 a.m. The hour when time stretched thin, when exhaustion became its own kind of haunting. The parking lot outside the 24-hour supermarket shimmered under the dull orange glow of overhead lamps, each one buzzing faintly, like trapped insects behind glass. The night smelled of wet asphalt and engine oil. He rubbed his eyes and stared at the screens, the soft static hum lulling him toward the edge of sleep. He hated the night shift. It wasn't just the boredom. It was the loneliness, the hollow quiet that made him aware of every creak, every flicker, every passing shadow. Sometimes he thought he could hear the building itself breathing. His life had shrunk to these hours. Endless nights guarding an empty lot, long drives home at dawn, and messages from an ex-wife that went unanswered. His son stopped calling months ago. The silence had become his only company. Then it happened. On the middle monitor, the one connected to camera 4, a faint shape appeared between two parked cars near the far end of the lot. Darren squinted, leaning closer, his breath fogging the glass. It looked like a person, thin, standing perfectly still, halfway between shadow and light. At first he assumed it was a trick of the rain, the way water distorted the lens. But the figure didn't waver. It just stood there, facing the camera. He frowned, reaching for the joystick on the control panel to zoom in. The camera adjusted with a mechanical whine, but the closer it focused, the more the image seemed to blur. No face, no movement, just the faint outline of a body, dripping with rain, completely motionless. "Probably some drunk," he muttered, grabbing his flashlight and jacket. The air outside was colder than he expected, sharp with the smell of wet concrete. His boots splashed through puddles as he crossed the lot, each step echoing against the empty storefronts. The supermarket's neon sign buzzed weakly above him, throwing broken colors across the asphalt. He reached the spot, between a white sedan and a rusted pickup. Empty. No footprints. No figure. Just rain whispering down from a starless sky. Darren's breath came out in thin white clouds as he turned slowly, scanning the lot. Nothing. But when he looked back at the security booth, one of the monitors inside was flickering rapidly, the screen flashing white, then dark, then white again. He hurried back, heart hammering now, half angry at himself for feeling afraid. He slammed the door behind him and dropped into the chair, water dripping from his jacket onto the floor. He rewound the footage, watching the grainy image stutter across the screen. The figure was still there, still motionless. But this time, when he hit play again, it seemed closer, just a few feet nearer to the camera. He checked the timestamp, still 2:14 a.m. He rewound again, frame by frame. The figure moved closer each time he went back. Not forward, backward. Darren's mouth went dry. The rain outside had stopped, but the sound of static filled the booth, low and steady, like whispering through a radio. The figure was gone from the screen now, replaced by empty pavement and the hum of electrical light. He exhaled shakily, convincing himself it was a glitch, bad signal from the storm. Then, from the monitor directly in front of him, a single frame flickered, too fast to catch, but enough for his brain to register the outline of a face. Or what might have been one. A pale blur pressed up against the lens. He froze. The static deepened, warping into something like breathing. He turned, slowly, toward the back of the booth. The air felt colder, heavier. The door was still shut, but his reflection in the window behind him wasn't moving. His real self was trembling. He could feel it, but the reflection just stared back, perfectly still, the faint outline of a second figure forming in the dark behind it. He stumbled toward the monitors, hands shaking as he reached for the switch to cut the feed. The breathing grew louder, wet, uneven, as if someone was right behind him, inches from his ear. The camera feed glitched one final time, flashing white, then black, then back to the live view. The lot was empty, except for him. He could see himself on the monitor now, sitting in the booth staring into the screen. But the image didn't match. On the screen, his double smiled. The static erupted into a deafening roar. Darren lunged for the power switch, plunging the booth into darkness. For a moment, there was silence again, the kind of silence that feels alive, that listens back. Then, just outside, the faint sound of footsteps splashing through puddles moved closer and closer until they stopped at the door. The doorknob turned once, twice, then nothing. He didn't breathe, didn't move. Minutes passed. The monitors flickered back to life on their own, one by one. Every screen showed the same image, camera 4, focused on the security booth itself. In the center of the frame, Darren could see his own window, and something standing just behind it. A faint hiss of static grew louder until it filled the room completely. His hands covered his ears, his pulse pounding like thunder. The sound cut abruptly, replaced by his own voice whispering through the speakers. "Look behind you." The monitors went black. Outside, the rain started again, washing away every reflection, every trace of movement. Inside the booth, the chair rocked slightly, empty, as the static hummed low and steady through the wires. From far above, camera 4 blinked once, refocused, and caught something faint on the glass. A handprint. Pressed from the inside. The road stretched endlessly ahead of her, black and wet beneath the glare of her headlights. The hum of the engine was the only sound Mia could hear. She had been driving for hours, her eyelids heavy, her fingers gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. The clock on the dashboard blinked 1:43 a.m. Her phone sat on the passenger seat, playing soft lo-fi music, though it barely masked the creeping unease that came from being alone on an empty highway. The night was fog-soaked, and the world beyond her windshield looked like it had been erased. Just faint outlines of trees, distant road signs, and the rhythmic sweep of wipers slicing through mist. The warning light on her dashboard blinked red. Low fuel. She cursed under her breath. The next gas station was still 5 miles away, according to her GPS, and she could already feel the car losing its pull on the uphill stretch. She pressed harder on the pedal, muttering to herself, trying to stay awake. The last thing she needed was to be stranded in the middle of nowhere. When she finally saw the flicker of a sign ahead, 24-hour fuel and mart, relief flooded through her. But as her car rolled into the lot, that relief curdled. The place didn't look open. The lights were on, but dim, flickering like old candles. A single street lamp buzzed overhead, casting a pale cone of light over cracked asphalt. Half the letters on the gas station sign were missing, leaving only _UEL and art. The convenience store windows were grimy, their posters faded to near white. The air was still, thick with the scent of rain-soaked dust and something faintly metallic. Mia parked beside the first pump. She left the engine running as she stepped out, the cold air biting her cheeks. Her shoes splashed through puddles, the sound echoing sharply against the emptiness around her. No cars, no people, just her own breathing and the faint electric hum of the lights overhead. She slid her card into the pump, beeped, then froze. The screen flashed, "Error, see attendant." She sighed and looked toward the store. Inside, a faint light flickered near the counter. She couldn't tell if anyone was there. She hesitated, her instincts screaming not to go in. But then, from the side of her vision, something moved. A shape small, human-shaped, standing just at the edge of the light near the dumpsters. Mia turned sharply, her pulse jumping. It was a girl, maybe 16 or 17, barefoot, her hair long and tangled, her dress soaked from the rain. She stood perfectly still, head tilted slightly to one side, as if curious. "Hey!" Mia called out, her voice shaky but trying to sound firm. "You okay?" The girl didn't respond. She just stood there, lips moving slightly as though whispering something too soft to hear. Mia took a hesitant step forward, her sneakers squeaking on wet pavement. The girl's eyes seemed strange, too dark, too wide. She whispered again, and Mia caught a fragment this time. "Help me?" A chill slid down Mia's spine. She took another step closer, but then a pair of headlights swept across the lot from the highway as a semi-truck roared past. The light blinded her for a second. When it faded, the girl was gone. Mia's breath caught in her throat. She turned in a slow circle, searching. Nothing. Just the soft hiss of rain beginning to fall again. The girl had vanished completely. No footprints. No splash of movement. Just empty space where she'd been. Mia backed toward her car, fumbling for the handle, her heart pounding hard enough to make her vision blur. She got in, slammed the door, locked it, and sat there staring at the pump. Her hands trembled as she turned off the engine and then on again, hoping maybe the system would reset. The pump lit up this time. She filled her tank, glancing around every few seconds, certain that the girl or something was watching her. Inside her car, she gripped the steering wheel and forced herself to laugh. "You're just tired," she whispered. "It's nothing. Just a kid or—" A soft tapping interrupted her thought. She froze. The sound came again. Tap, tap, tap. Her breath hitched as she turned toward the passenger window. There, just inches from her face, was the same girl, pale, drenched, eyes wide and unblinking. Her lips moved again, forming the same words. "Help me!" Mia screamed and hit the gas. The car lurched forward, tires screeching as water sprayed up from the puddles. When she looked back, the girl was gone again. The lot was empty, just the lone gas station fading in the rearview mirror. She didn't stop driving until she reached the highway, her hands still shaking uncontrollably. When she finally slowed enough to check her phone, she realized there was no service. No stations nearby, just endless dark road ahead and behind. The next morning, Mia stopped at a diner on the outskirts of town. She told the waitress about the gas station. How strange it looked, how the pumps barely worked, how she'd seen a girl there in the middle of the night. The woman's face went pale. "That station's been closed for years," she said quietly. "They shut it down after the accident. Some drunk hit a girl walking across the lot. Never caught the guy. They say her mom still leaves flowers there." Mia's stomach dropped. "But there were lights. I saw her." The waitress just shook her head. "Honey, that place doesn't have power. Hasn't in a long time." Mia didn't finish her coffee. She left a few crumpled bills on the counter and drove off, trying not to look at the empty lot when she passed it again later that week. But she couldn't help herself. The sign was completely dark now. The windows were boarded up. The pumps were gone. Yet, as she drove by, the reflection in her rearview mirror caught something faint, just for a second. A girl standing in the center of the lot, barefoot, her dress fluttering in the wind. When Mia blinked, she was gone again. That night, as Mia tried to fall asleep, she dreamed she was back at the gas station, standing under the flickering light. The girl was there too, whispering softly, closer this time, her words clear. "Thank you for stopping." Mia woke with a start, her pillow damp with sweat. Outside her apartment window, the rain had started again, tapping gently against the glass. She got up to get water, but when she passed by her front door, she froze. On the floor, just inside the threshold, were small wet footprints, barefoot, leading from the door toward her bed. Ethan always parked on the lower level of the mall's employee garage, in the same corner space where the dim light from the exit sign barely reached. He worked the night shift at the electronics store, stocking shelves after closing and cleaning up before dawn. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. The best part, he told himself, was the quiet. No crowds, no chatter, just the hum of machines and the distant echo of footsteps down long, empty hallways. But lately, he had begun to dread the walk to his car. Started about 3 weeks ago. Every night when his shift ended around 3 a.m., he'd head down the elevator, push through the metal door, and see the same old white van parked a few spaces away from his car. It was always in the same spot. Engine idling, no lights on, no movement inside. Just that low mechanical rumble that seemed to vibrate in his bones. He told himself it was probably another night shift worker or someone waiting for a friend. But it was strange, no one ever got out and no one ever came back to it. By the 5th night, it had begun to feel like more than coincidence. That evening, the mall was eerily silent. The rain outside made the roof creak, and the fluorescent lights in the corridors buzzed like static. Ethan clocked out, pulled on his hoodie, and took the elevator down. As the doors opened to the garage, The familiar chill of damp concrete hit him, along with the sound he was dreading, the soft, rhythmic purr of the van's idling engine. It was there again. Same spot, same van. No lights, just humming in the dark. Ethan slowed his steps, trying not to stare. The air smelled of oil and old exhaust. A puddle beneath the van reflected the faint orange of a dying bulb above. He could see his own reflection rippling in the water, nervous, tired, pretending not to care. He reached his car, unlocked it quickly, and sat down, locking the doors before breathing out. He started the engine, the radio springing to life with a burst of static. He laughed at himself, shaking his head. "You're being paranoid," he muttered. But then, in the corner of his eye, the van's headlights flicked on. Ethan froze. The lights didn't brighten like they should have. They just glowed faintly, like two pale eyes staring at him through the darkness. His heart thudded against his ribs. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the lights shut off again. He told himself it was a short circuit, an electrical glitch, nothing more. But as he drove toward the exit ramp, his eyes caught something that made his stomach twist. The van's driver's side door was open. The next night, Ethan decided to park closer to the elevator, under the brighter lights. He didn't want to be anywhere near that van. But when he came down after his shift, the van had moved. It was now parked directly across from his car, facing him head-on. The engine was off this time, but the driver's seat was tilted back as if someone were lying in it. He couldn't see through the tinted glass. His hand hovered over his phone, but he stopped himself from calling security. What would he even say? That a parked car made him nervous? He got in his car and started the engine. The air inside felt too warm, too close. He looked in his mirror and saw nothing behind him, only the long, empty ramp leading up to the exit. He put the car in reverse. His tires squealed slightly as he backed out. And then, in his mirror, he saw movement. The van's headlights flashed once. Ethan floored it, racing up the ramp. He didn't stop until he was miles away from the mall, the van nowhere in sight. By the time he got home, he'd convinced himself it had to be some maintenance worker. Maybe even someone sleeping in their vehicle. Nothing supernatural. Nothing sinister. But that confidence didn't last long. 2 nights later, Ethan came back to find one of his tires flat. A deep gash ran along the rubber, clean and deliberate. He pulled out his phone to call for a tow, but when he unlocked it, the screen stayed black. Dead battery. He cursed under his breath and leaned against the car. That's when he heard it. The soft hum of an engine starting. He turned slowly. The white van was idling again, closer than ever, maybe 10 feet away. The driver's door hung open, swaying slightly with the draft. But there was no one inside. He started backing away, his footsteps echoing loudly in the concrete space. The lights above flickered, buzzing violently before one of them went out with a loud pop. The garage fell into shadow. He reached the elevator doors and pressed the button repeatedly, his breath shallow. The hum of the van's engine grew louder, reverberating through the walls. Then it stopped. Silence, thick and heavy. The elevator dinged softly, and Ethan stepped inside, jabbing the button for the main level. The doors closed, and for a brief moment he felt relief. Then, just before they sealed shut, he thought he saw something, reflected in the stainless steel of the doors. A figure standing beside the van, watching him. He didn't look back. He went straight to the security office. The guard on duty was half asleep, sipping coffee. Ethan told him what happened, about the van, the sounds, the strange figure. The guard frowned, looking skeptical but humored him anyway. They pulled up the footage from level 2, camera 6, the one that covered Ethan's parking spot. The grainy video showed Ethan's car, the white van, and the flickering lights above. Ethan leaned forward, eyes wide, waiting for the moment he'd seen the figure. The video jumped slightly. Static washed across the screen. The guard rewound, paused, played again. The van was gone. Not moved, not driven off, just gone. One frame it was there, the next it wasn't. The timestamp never skipped. Ethan stared in disbelief. "That's impossible," he whispered. "It was right there." The guard shook his head, rewound the footage again. The same thing happened, the van simply blinked out of existence. Then the guard frowned and clicked to an older file, pulling up a police report from months back. "You sure it looked like this one?" he asked, turning the screen. Ethan nodded without hesitation. The guard's eyes narrowed. "Because this van was towed out of here in June. Belonged to a guy wanted for a double homicide. They found blood inside. No one's seen it since." Ethan felt his stomach turn to ice. The room seemed to tilt. He could still hear it, the low hum of that engine somewhere in his memory, echoing under the floor. He didn't return to work the next night, or the night after. He quit without notice, packed up, and moved to another city within the week. But sometimes, when he parked late after work or walked through another dim garage, he'd hear it again. That faint, rhythmic hum, distant but unmistakable. And once, when he looked in his rearview mirror after parking at home, he swore he saw two faint headlights blinking from the far end of the street, still idling, waiting. Jenna's breath came out in soft clouds as she hurried across the vast, half-frozen expanse of the shopping mall parking lot. The night was quiet except for the hollow rumble of wind slipping between rows of cars. Her arms ached from carrying too many shopping bags, their glossy surfaces reflecting the weak yellow light of the street lamps above. Christmas music still played faintly from the closed mall, warped and distant. It was almost 11:45 p.m., and she was one of the last to leave. Her car sat alone under a flickering lamp, its metal surface dusted with frost. Every few seconds the light overhead buzzed and dimmed, plunging her into momentary darkness before coming back alive with a crackling hiss. She pulled her coat tighter around her, balancing the bags awkwardly as she dug for her keys. Somewhere in the distance, a shopping cart rolled lazily across the pavement, pushed by the winter wind. Jenna's heart was pounding harder than it should. Maybe it was the cold, or maybe it was because she was 8 months pregnant and everything took effort these days. Her lower back throbbed as she reached her car, a silver compact she had bought secondhand last summer. She set the bags on the ground and fumbled with the keys. That was when she heard it, a sound that sliced through the night like something fragile breaking. Crying. A woman's soft, muffled sobs echoed across the empty lot. Jenna froze. The sound was faint at first, almost too distant to be real, but it grew louder, coming from somewhere behind her. She turned slowly, scanning the shadows between cars. "Hello?" she called out. Her voice came out small and uncertain. The crying stopped. Her breath fogged in the cold air. The silence pressed around her, heavy and unnatural. She tried to laugh at herself, forcing her hand to steady as she unlocked the door and reached for the bags. Then the crying started again, closer this time, and clearly that of a woman. Jenna looked up, her pulse spiking. That was when she saw her. A woman stood several feet away, partially hidden by the shadow of a minivan. She was pregnant, too. At least, she looked it. Her coat stretched tight around a swollen belly. Her hair was long and matted, her face pale in the harsh light. She stared at Jenna, eyes wide and glistening. "Are you okay?" Jenna asked, stepping forward a little. "Do you need help?" The woman didn't answer. Her lips parted, trembling, but no sound came out. Her eyes shimmered with something between sorrow and fear. Jenna felt an overwhelming sense of empathy, an instinctive connection. She knew that look, the exhaustion, the loneliness. Jenna took another step. "Hey, it's all right. Are you hurt?" The woman blinked slowly, then tilted her head as if studying Jenna. Her mouth moved, forming words too soft to hear. The wind howled briefly, drowning everything out. When it faded, the woman was gone. Jenna spun around, scanning the lot, heart hammering. The space where the woman had stood was empty, just wet pavement glistening under yellow light. She hurried back to her car, fumbling with the door handle, trying to convince herself it was fatigue. Hallucinations weren't uncommon during pregnancy, her doctor had said. Hormones, stress, lack of sleep. But as she pulled the door shut, she caught sight of something on the car window, something that made her freeze. A handprint, pressed perfectly into the frost-covered glass just beside her seat. Not hers. It was smaller, slimmer, and the fingers were longer, like they had been pressed there moments ago. The warmth from the touch had already melted the frost beneath it. Her breathing quickened. She wiped the window with her sleeve, heart pounding so hard she felt lightheaded. The print faded into streaks of condensation, and for a second, she thought she saw a reflection. Someone standing behind her car. She turned sharply. Nothing. Her hands trembled as she started the engine. The car heater coughed to life, filling the small space with a mechanical whir. She gripped the wheel, trying to steady herself. "Just drive," she whispered. "You're fine. It's just your mind playing tricks." She was halfway to the exit when she saw movement again, at the far end of the lot, beneath the flickering streetlight. The same woman, standing still, one hand resting on her stomach. Jenna slowed, squinting through the frost-flecked windshield. The woman's head tilted up slightly, as if listening. Then, without warning, the light above her blew out with a loud pop, and she vanished into the dark. Jenna pressed the gas, tears stinging her eyes as she pulled onto the road. The hum of her tires against the pavement drowned out everything, but her mind kept circling back to that face, those empty, pleading eyes. When she got home, she sat in the driveway for several minutes, the engine still running. The house lights were off, the neighborhood quiet. For the first time, she noticed her reflection in the rearview mirror. The same fear was there. The same wide, glassy stare the woman in the parking lot had worn. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, she told herself she'd imagined it all. Maybe she'd seen another late-night shopper. Maybe her tired brain filled in the blanks. But when she got into her car to drive to work, she noticed something new. On the inside of her windshield, faint but visible, another handprint had appeared. Identical to the first. The same size. The same long, thin fingers. She stared at it, unable to breathe, until her phone rang, snapping her out of it. It was the mall security office. The guard spoke quickly, his voice trembling slightly. "Ma'am, you might want to come in. We were reviewing footage from last night and saw something unusual." Jenna hesitated, the air thick in her lungs. "What do you mean?" The man cleared his throat. "Around midnight, the cameras caught you talking to someone in the lot. You were walking toward them and then, it just looks like you're talking to thin air. There was no one there." She couldn't answer. The guard continued. "And ma'am, before you left, something else appeared on your car window. A handprint. But when our guy went to check, it wasn't frozen. It was wet. Fresh." Jenna hung up without a word. That night, she parked somewhere different, closer to the entrance, under a bright lamp. She stayed in her car for a long time, watching the people come and go. For the first time, she realized how empty parking lots really were. How they looked like graveyards made of asphalt and light. Her hands rested on her belly, feeling the baby shift gently beneath her skin. A single tear slipped down her cheek. Somewhere in the distance, under another flickering lamp, a figure stood. Pregnant woman. Watching. Jenna blinked, and she was gone. When she looked back at her reflection in the window, she saw something else. Another handprint forming slowly beside hers, from the inside of the glass. Ethan adjusted the rearview mirror, squinting at the hazy reflection of the deserted parking structure behind him. Midnight had come and gone, but the underground lot of the hospital still glowed under its sterile, humming lights. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and oil, heavy with a claustrophobic chill. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to push away the weight of another double shift. The graveyard hours had a way of hollowing him out, leaving him running on caffeine and habit. His phone buzzed against the passenger seat. It was a text from his wife. "You okay? You said you'd be home an hour ago." He sighed and typed back, "Just leaving. Had a rough night. Be home soon." He slipped the phone into his pocket and started the car. The engine coughed to life, its sound echoing unnaturally through the concrete chamber. He exhaled deeply, his breath fogging in the cold air. For a moment, he let the exhaustion wash over him. Then, from somewhere in the distance, came the sound of footsteps. He froze, glancing up. They were faint but distinct, slow, deliberate taps of shoes against concrete. The sound echoed through the structure in uneven intervals, stopping and starting as if whoever was walking was trying not to be heard. Ethan leaned forward, peering into the rearview mirror again. Nothing. Just the endless rows of parked cars, their polished metal reflecting the fluorescent lights like still water. He told himself it was just a security guard doing rounds, maybe someone taking a shortcut through the lot. But the footsteps grew louder, closer. He turned the key again, urging the engine to steady itself. The lights flickered briefly on the dashboard. The car sputtered. Then silence. A cold dread slid down his spine. He hit the ignition again. Nothing. The battery light blinked weakly, then faded. He muttered a curse and slammed his hand against the steering wheel. The footsteps had stopped. Now there was only the steady hum of the overhead lamps, and his own heartbeat hammering in his ears. Ethan forced himself to step out of the car, the metallic clang of the door echoing through the empty space. His breath puffed out in white bursts. He scanned the rows, eyes darting from shadow to shadow. "Hello?" he called out, trying to sound braver than he felt. "Security." His voice bounced back, distorted by the concrete walls. No answer. He started walking toward the exit ramp, shoes squeaking faintly against the slick floor. Halfway there, he saw it. A single car parked crookedly in one of the back rows, a black sedan with its headlights still on. They glared harshly against the far wall, flooding the area in blinding white. Ethan shielded his eyes, taking a few cautious steps closer. "Hey, you okay?" he shouted, raising his voice this time. "You left your lights on." No movement. As he approached, he noticed something odd. The driver's side door was slightly open. The engine was running, but there was no one inside. He hesitated. His gut told him to leave, to just walk back to his own car and wait for help. But curiosity tugged at him like a hook under his ribs. He approached slowly, every instinct screaming at him to be careful. When he reached the car, he could see the condensation on the inside of the windows, fresh, like someone had just been breathing heavily inside. He bent down, peering through the glass. There were small handprints on the window, dozens of them, tiny, overlapping, smeared as if a child or several had pressed against the inside of the car, reaching out. Ethan's stomach turned. He stepped back, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Then he heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping. It was coming from the trunk. Tap, tap, tap. He froze in place, every muscle locking. It was soft, deliberate, like someone tapping a fingernail on metal from the inside. "Hello?" His voice cracked. "Is someone in there?" No response. Just another tap. He looked around, hoping to see another person, a guard, anyone, but the lot was empty. He took a shaky breath, then reached for the trunk handle. It was ice cold to the touch. He pulled. The trunk creaked open, revealing nothing. Just an old blanket, a few scattered receipts, and the faint smell of something metallic, blood, maybe, or rust. He stood there, dumbfounded. The tapping had stopped. Then, from behind him, the sound started again. Tap, tap, tap. He turned sharply toward his own car. The sound was coming from his trunk now. Ethan stumbled backward, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. No, 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 no. He ran toward his car, the air thick with panic. He hesitated only long enough to glance around. Still no sign of anyone else. The world felt dead, frozen. He yanked open his trunk. Empty. Just his work bag and a spare tire. And then his phone buzzed again. He fumbled to grab it, glancing at the screen. Another text from his wife. Only this time it wasn't just a message. There was a photo attached. It was a picture of their driveway, his car, parked. The text below read, "Why did you come back? I thought you were still at work." Ethan's throat closed up. His car wasn't there. It was right here in the hospital lot. He dropped the phone. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Behind him, something moved, softly, like bare feet sliding across the concrete. He turned slowly, his breath ragged, eyes searching the shadows. First, he saw nothing. Then, at the far end of the row, a figure stepped into the light. A small girl, no older than 6, wearing a hospital gown that hung loosely around her thin frame. Her skin was pale, her hair matted. She stared at him with wide, hollow eyes. Ethan's voice trembled. "Are you lost?" The girl didn't answer. She tilted her head slightly, then raised her hand, palm out. Her fingers were smeared with something dark. And then she began to tap her hand rhythmically against a nearby car door. Tap, tap, tap. Ethan stepped back, his body trembling. The sound multiplied. All around him, in every direction, more tapping echoed through the garage, on car windows, on metal doors, on concrete pillars. He spun in circles, dizzy with fear. Dozens of faint silhouettes moved in the shadows. Small figures, childlike, each one tapping, tapping, tapping. His scream was swallowed by the sound of engines revving to life, cars starting on their own, headlights bursting into blinding white beams. For a moment, the parking garage was alive with noise, light, and movement. Then everything went black. When security found his car the next morning, the lights were off, the battery dead. Ethan's phone sat shattered on the concrete beside the driver's door. His car trunk was open but empty. The only trace left behind was a series of small handprints smeared across the rear windshield, their edges glistening faintly under the fluorescent lights. Marcus locked the door of his small-town grocery store and exhaled a long breath that misted in the freezing night air. The clock above the register had just struck 1:37 a.m. It had been another late closing. Stocking shelves, counting registers, and cleaning up after the teenage employees who had long gone home. The lot outside was nearly empty, just a few cars left under the harsh white glow of the security lamps. He was bone-tired, the kind of exhaustion that hums deep in the muscles and makes your heartbeat feel heavy. He slung his jacket over his shoulder and made his way toward his car. A faded blue pickup parked near the edge of the lot. The silence pressed in on him. There was something about parking lots after midnight that never felt right, as if the world had fallen asleep but left the lights on by mistake. The sound of his boots on asphalt seemed unnaturally loud, echoing back at him. As he reached for his keys, a noise drifted through the stillness. A faint dragging sound, soft, rhythmic, like something being pulled slowly across the pavement. Marcus froze, his hand hovering midair. He turned his head, scanning the far end of the lot. Nothing but shadows stretching between the rows of cars. He waited. The sound came again, closer now. "Hello!" His voice echoed, fragile against the empty space. "That you, Tanner?" His assistant manager sometimes stayed behind to smoke, but there was no answer. Just that same dragging noise, then a hollow metallic clank, as if something had hit a car bumper. Marcus squinted toward the darker part of the lot, where one of the overhead lights had gone out days ago. The bulb had been flickering for weeks, but now it was completely dead. That corner sat in darkness, thick and motionless. He swallowed hard and forced a chuckle. "Raccoons again," he muttered. "Or some kid messing around." Still, he found himself gripping his keys tighter, the jagged metal edges biting into his palm. He took a slow step backward, his eyes never leaving the shadows. That was when he saw it, a shape. Something or someone was crouched behind a nearby car. It was hard to make out under the dim light, but Marcus could see movement. A hunched figure, rocking slightly, its head tilted toward the ground. "Hey!" he called out, trying to sound in control. "Lot's closed. You can't be here." No answer. The figure froze mid-rock, then straightened up slowly. The motion was unnatural, jerky, deliberate. Marcus's throat went dry. His instincts screamed to get in the truck and go, but his feet refused to move. The figure took one stiff step forward, then another. Under the faint glow of the next light, the person's outline came into focus. It was a woman, or at least it looked like one. Her clothes were soaked, clinging to her body. Her hair hung in dripping clumps that hid her face. Each step she took left a faint, wet print on the asphalt. Marcus's voice trembled. "Ma'am, you okay? You hurt?" The woman stopped about 10 feet away. The air between them felt heavier, charged with something unseen. The smell hit him next, a sour, metallic scent like old water and rust. She lifted her head. Her eyes were milky white, her skin pale and waterlogged. Mud streaked her cheeks. When she opened her mouth, no sound came out, just a strained gasp, as if her lungs were filled with liquid. Marcus stumbled back, his breath catching in his throat. He fumbled with his keys, nearly dropping them, then forced them into the lock and yanked the truck door open. His hands shook as he slammed it shut and hit the locks. The woman didn't move. She just stood there, staring, her lips parting and closing soundlessly. Then, in a flash, she was gone. Marcus blinked, heart hammering. 1 second she was there, the next, nothing but an empty stretch of pavement. He gunned the engine, tires squealing as he sped toward the exit. But halfway out, his headlights flickered, casting quick, broken glimpses of the lot behind him. For a split second, he saw her again, standing directly under one of the lamps, head tilted to the side, dripping water that pooled at her feet. Then the lights went out. Marcus didn't look back. He drove all the way home with shaking hands, checking his mirrors every few seconds. Each time, he half expected to see her sitting in the bed of his truck. When he finally pulled into his driveway, the relief was short-lived. As he got out, he noticed the smell again, that same damp, rotten scent. His boots splashed into a small puddle forming beneath his truck. Confused, he crouched down. Water was dripping steadily from the tailgate. He lifted it slowly. Inside, the bed was drenched. Pools of murky water glistened in the moonlight, rippling slightly, as if disturbed. Then something rose from beneath the surface. A pale, bloated hand. Marcus screamed and stumbled back, the tailgate slamming shut. He ran inside, locking the door behind him, chest heaving. He tried to call the police, but his hands were trembling too badly. When he finally managed to dial, the dispatcher's calm voice on the other end steadied him just enough to explain. He told them about the woman in the lot, about the water, about the hand. The dispatcher was quiet for a long moment. "Sir," she said finally, her tone low. "Could you repeat what lot you said that was?" He did. "You might not know this," she continued slowly, "but 2 months ago, a woman drowned in her car there. The drainage system flooded during a storm. They didn't find her for almost a week." Marcus's mouth went dry. "That's not possible," he whispered. "I saw her tonight." The dispatcher didn't respond right away. When she did, her voice had softened. "You're not the first person to report that." The line went dead. Marcus sat frozen, staring out the window toward his truck. The puddle beneath it had spread wider, glinting under the porch light. As he watched, small ripples began to form again, faint but steady, like something beneath the water was breathing. He didn't sleep that night. Every time the house creaked, he imagined the sound of water dripping onto the floor. By dawn, when he finally dared to step outside, his truck bed was bone dry. Except for one thing. In the center of the empty bed lay a soaked grocery store receipt, dated from 2 months ago. The ink had run, but a few words were still visible. "Thank you for shopping with us, Marcus." He stood there, heart thundering, unable to move, as the faint smell of stagnant water returned on the morning breeze. The night shift at the old office complex was something Lily had grown used to, at least she thought she had. She was 27, a junior architect at a struggling firm that refused to admit its glory days were over. Most nights, it was just her. The hum of the fluorescent lights, and the low whir of the printer echoing through the sterile hallways. But tonight felt different from the start. The air had that stillness she couldn't explain, like the entire building was holding its breath. She left the office a little after midnight, her computer still humming as she packed her things. The cleaning crew had already come and gone, leaving the corridors faintly smelling of lemon and dust. The silence stretched endlessly. Her heels clicked softly against the polished floor as she made her way to the elevator, the sound far too loud in the emptiness. When the elevator doors opened, the fluorescent light inside flickered once, then steadied. She stepped in and pressed the button for the basement parking lot. The ride down was smooth but oppressively quiet. No music, no hum, just the faint mechanical groan of the cables above her. When the doors slid open, the heavy scent of gasoline and oil greeted her. The air was colder down here, and the concrete pillars stood like sentinels, casting long, uneven shadows. Most of the cars were gone. Only a handful remained under the dim orange glow of the emergency lamps. She walked briskly toward her car, her keys clinking in her hand. Her little silver hatchback sat in the far corner, where the light barely reached. She hated that spot. The bulb above had burned out weeks ago, and maintenance kept forgetting to fix it. Tonight, that corner looked like a black hole, a perfect square of nothingness. Halfway there, she froze. A sharp, metallic clang echoed through the garage. It came from somewhere near the exit ramp. She turned instinctively, eyes darting between the rows of vehicles. "Hello?" she called, her voice shaky, bouncing off the concrete walls. No reply. She forced a nervous laugh. Probably just the metal gate settling, or a loose chain hitting the wall. She turned back toward her car. And then she saw it. A man was standing beside her car. Her breath caught. He was tall, much taller than her, and dressed in dark clothes. His posture was strange. Slouched forward slightly, head tilted as if studying the car window. For a moment he didn't move at all. Just stood there, still and silent. Lily's stomach twisted. "Hey!" she shouted, trying to sound firm. "Can I help you?" No response. The man didn't even flinch. She took a few cautious steps closer, holding her phone up like a weapon. "Seriously, get away from my car or I'm calling security." Finally, he turned. The movement was slow, deliberate. The flickering orange light barely touched his face, but what she could see made her heart drop. His eyes were wide, too wide, and his mouth hung slightly open as though frozen mid-word. His skin looked pale and dry, stretched too thin over his bones. He took a step toward her. Lily stumbled back, fumbling to unlock her phone. "I'm calling the police," she blurted out. Her hands trembled as she tried to dial, but when she looked up again, he was gone. The space around her car was empty. She stood there, frozen. The silence was unbearable. She could hear her own pulse pounding in her ears. Carefully, she approached her car, scanning every shadow. Nothing. Maybe he'd run off. Maybe he'd been some homeless guy, desperate or confused. She reached for the handle and froze again. Every window on her car was fogged from the inside. A cold shiver crawled down her back. She hadn't even turned the car on yet. Her hand hovered over the handle, shaking. Then suddenly something moved inside. Just a blur of motion behind the glass, too fast to process. She screamed and stumbled backward, dropping her keys. The metallic clatter echoed through the empty garage. Her eyes darted wildly, trying to see inside. The fog shifted slightly, like someone had brushed against the inside of the glass. Then, slowly, a handprint appeared on the window, pressed hard enough to leave streaks in the condensation. Her scream echoed again, swallowed by the silence that followed. She didn't think. She just ran. Her footsteps slapped against the concrete, breath ragged, tears blurring her vision. She darted toward the stairwell, pushing the door open and slamming it behind her. She pressed her back against the cold metal, gasping. Her chest burned with every breath. She could hear the faint sound of dripping water somewhere below, each drop a cruel reminder of the silence outside. Then, faintly, through the heavy door, she heard it, the sound of her car engine starting. Lily froze. Her keys were still on the ground outside. The engine revved once, then idled. Her heart pounded so hard she felt dizzy. She pressed her ear against the door, trying to listen. The engine stopped, and then a voice. A man's voice, soft and low, whispering something she couldn't quite catch. The tone was rhythmic, like he was repeating the same phrase over and over. She strained to hear. Then, clear as a bell, she heard it. "Don't look at me." She stumbled backward from the door, her entire body trembling. The words were wrong, too calm, too measured. She stared at the metal door, terrified that it might open. But the whispering stopped. The silence returned. For several minutes, She stood there, gripping her phone like a lifeline. Finally, she forced herself to call security. Her voice shook as she explained what happened. The guard promised to meet her down there in 5 minutes. When she finally worked up the courage to open the door again, the garage was silent. Her car sat exactly where it had been before, untouched. The fog was gone from the windows. The guard arrived moments later, flashlight in hand. He checked around the car, under it, even inside. Nothing. Probably some kids messing with you, he said, forcing a smile. You'd be surprised how many people break in just to scare folks. Lily nodded, pretending to believe him. He escorted her to her car, handed her the keys she'd dropped, and waited while she started it. The engine purred quietly, normal and steady. She gave a shaky wave as she pulled out of the lot. By the time she got home, she almost convinced herself it was over. That exhaustion and nerves had twisted reality into something worse. But the next morning, when she stepped into her car for work, her stomach dropped. There was a message written across the inside of her windshield, smeared faintly in condensation. 3 words, barely legible, scrawled in uneven strokes. Don't look back. She sat frozen in her seat, the sunlight glinting off the faint letters, until the reflection in the glass shifted. Behind her, just outside the car, someone was standing. The reflection lingered for a moment, then faded as the fog cleared, leaving her alone in silence, but still too afraid to breathe. Ryan had always loved working late. The stillness of the night, the emptiness of the world around him. It made him feel oddly peaceful. He was a security guard at a mid-sized corporate building on the edge of town, and the parking lot was part of his nightly patrol. It was usually routine. Check the cameras, lock the side gates, make sure no cars were left unlocked or lights left on. But tonight, something about the air felt wrong. It was past 2 a.m., and a heavy fog had rolled in, thick enough to blur the edges of everything. The bright white security lights overhead glowed like pale orbs in the mist, their beams dissolving just a few feet out. The lot stretched endlessly before him. Rows upon rows of sleeping cars, silent and still, their metal shells faintly glistening with dew. Ryan adjusted his flashlight and started down the central lane, boots crunching lightly against gravel. His radio crackled faintly with static, the usual background noise that kept him company. He checked each row methodically, the beam of light cutting through the haze. Halfway down the lot, he noticed something odd. One car, a dark red sedan, was parked at an angle, its front bumper barely over the painted line. That wasn't unusual by itself, but what caught his attention was that the driver's door was wide open. He frowned, lowering the flashlight. "What the hell?" he muttered, and began walking toward it. The closer he got, the stranger it looked. The interior light was on, flickering weakly. The inside was clean, neat even, except for a single item on the passenger seat. A purse. It looked expensive, leather with gold trim, the kind someone wouldn't just forget. "Hello?" he called out, his breath fogging the air. "Security. Anyone here?" No answer. He scanned the area, the fog swallowing everything beyond a few yards. The sound of his own breathing seemed deafening. He felt that strange prickling behind his neck, the instinctive unease that something or someone was watching. He leaned into the car and picked up the purse. It was unzipped. Inside was a phone, still on, the screen cracked but glowing faintly. A missed call notification blinked across it. "Mom? 3 missed calls." Ryan frowned and looked around again. "Ma'am? You here somewhere?" He called louder, his voice echoing into the fog. From far away, somewhere deeper in the lot, came the faint sound of a car door slamming shut. Ryan straightened immediately. The sound had been sharp, deliberate. He turned off the flashlight to listen better. Silence. Then another noise, this time softer. Footsteps. "Hey!" he shouted, sweeping the flashlight beam across the mist. The light caught glimpses of car roofs, mirrors, and shadows that seemed to shift and stretch. "This area's closed. You need to come out where I can see you." The footsteps stopped. He took a step forward, his pulse rising. The air felt heavier now, thicker with moisture. He could hear a faint dripping sound nearby, like water hitting concrete. The fog seemed to move around him, curling and shifting in slow waves. Then he saw it, someone standing a few rows over. It was a woman, wearing what looked like a pale blouse and jeans, her long hair clinging damply to her shoulders. She was barefoot, her feet barely visible under the mist. She stood perfectly still, facing away from him. Ryan hesitated. "Ma'am? You all right?" She didn't move. "Ma'am, it's not safe out here. Can you hear me?" Still nothing. Her stillness unsettled him more than any scream could have. He inched closer, hand on his flashlight like a weapon. "Okay, I'm coming over, all right? Just stay right there." He walked slowly, boots scuffing against the wet ground. His flashlight flickered again, cutting out for a moment before returning with a weak glow. The fog thickened around her, making her form waver like a reflection on disturbed water. When he was about 10 feet away, she moved. Her head turned. Not smoothly, but in a slow, stuttering motion, as if her neck didn't quite know how to bend. Her face was pale, the skin pulled too tight, her mouth opened slightly. Her eyes, they weren't right. They were wide and glassy, reflecting the flashlight beam like mirrors. Ryan stopped dead. "Ma'am." She blinked once and took a step toward him. "Stay back," he barked, stepping back instinctively. "I said stay back." But she didn't stop. She walked straight toward him, movements jerky and uneven, like a puppet pulled by tangled strings. He could hear the faint shuffle of her bare feet against the pavement, the wet slap of skin on stone. Ryan turned and ran. His boots pounded against the concrete as he bolted toward the main building. He didn't look back. He didn't want to. His flashlight beam swung wildly, bouncing off windshields and concrete pillars. But halfway across the lot, his radio crackled again. Soft at first, then louder, a hiss of static that made him flinch. And beneath the static, a voice. "Don't leave me here." He froze mid-stride. The voice had been female. Clear. He turned slowly, flashlight trembling in his hand. She was standing right behind him. Her face was inches from his, pale, expressionless, eyes milky white. Her mouth opened slowly, impossibly wide, but no sound came out. Then suddenly she lunged. Ryan screamed and swung the flashlight, the beam cutting through the fog like a blade. For a split second, her face distorted, jaw unhinging, features warping. Then, nothing. The fog swallowed her whole. He stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet, landing hard on the ground. His flashlight rolled away, the beam spinning until it caught something glinting near his boot. A phone, the same one from the purse. His cracked screen flickered once, showing a photo. It was of him, standing in the parking lot. Right now. He scrambled to his feet and ran. He didn't stop until he reached the security office, slamming the door shut behind him. His chest burned from running, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He locked the door, turned off the lights, and crouched beneath the window. Minutes passed in suffocating silence. He could hear only the steady hum of the office computer and the faint drip of condensation outside. Then, from the security monitor, a sound crackled through the speakers, the live feed from the parking lot camera. He forced himself to look. The fog outside was denser now, blanketing the entire lot. In the grainy black and white feed, something moved, a shape drifting between the rows of cars. Then another, and another, dozens of faint outlines, human-shaped but indistinct, emerging one by one from the mist. They weren't walking, they were gliding. Ryan's breath hitched. His trembling hand hovered over the power button, but before he could press it, one of the figures stopped. He turned toward the camera. Even through the static, even through the distortion, he could see the face. The same woman from before. Her lips parted. Her mouth moved silently at first. Then the speakers crackled again, and her voice whispered through the room. "Don't leave the lights on." The feed cut to black. When the morning shift arrived, Ryan's patrol car was found parked neatly at the front gate. His flashlight and radio were still inside. The security monitors were all turned off except one. On that single screen, frozen in static, was the parking lot. Empty, silent, except for one faint, foggy outline standing in the corner. Megan's hands trembled as she clutched her car keys tighter, the metal biting into her palm. It was almost midnight, and the grocery store parking lot was eerily silent. The rows of parked cars stretched endlessly, their dark silhouettes broken only by the pale glow of flickering streetlights. She hated this lot. Too many blind corners, too many shadows between the cars. But tonight, she had no choice. Her shift at the hospital had run late again, and she was bone-tired, her eyes stinging from exhaustion. She hit the unlock button. Her car's headlights flashed twice, a small beacon of safety in the gloom. The sound echoed unnaturally loud across the empty lot. She started walking faster, her heels clicking in rhythm with her racing heartbeat. Then she heard it, a soft thud. It came from somewhere behind her, muffled and slow, like the sound of a shoe scuffing pavement. She froze. The air was cold and heavy, carrying the faint scent of rain. She turned her head slightly, just enough to glance over her shoulder. But there was nothing. Just rows of motionless vehicles and a single cart left abandoned by the corral, one wheel squeaking softly in the wind. "Get a grip, Megan," she muttered under her breath. "You're tired, that's all." But as she reached her car, she heard it again, closer this time, the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps following her. Her stomach twisted. She whipped around, eyes scanning the misty distance, the faint hum of fluorescent lights buzzing above. "Hello?" she called, her voice trembling despite her best effort to sound firm. "Who's there?" No answer. She reached for the door handle, her pulse pounding in her throat. As she did, she caught something in the corner of her eye, a shadow between two nearby cars. It moved, just slightly, enough to make her breath hitch. She stepped back, trying to see more clearly. The figure was still there, barely visible in the dim light. Tall, unmoving, watching her. Her fingers fumbled for her phone in her bag, but before she could grab it, the figure shifted again, stepping forward into the faint beam of a streetlight. It was a man, or at least he looked like one. His clothes were dark, soaked as if he'd walked through rain. His face was partially obscured by a hood, but his posture was strange, too stiff, too straight. He stood there, perfectly still, his hands hanging limply at his sides. "Sir," Megan said cautiously, taking a step back. "Do you need help?" He didn't respond. Her chest tightened. She pressed the unlock button again, her car's lights flashing once more. The sound startled her, and she looked back toward the man. But he was gone. "Jesus Christ," she whispered, spinning in circles, searching the rows of cars. Nothing, just silence. She quickly opened her door and slid inside, locking it behind her. Her hands shook as she shoved the keys into the ignition, but before she could start the car, she saw movement in the rearview mirror. Her blood ran cold. A faint outline in the foggy back window. Something tall, pressed close against the glass, unmoving. Megan's breath caught. Her trembling hand reached for the lock button again, though she knew it was already locked. "No, no, no, no," she whispered, eyes darting to the mirrors, then back to the rearview. The shape was still there. She flipped on the headlights, and for a split second, the parking lot lit up in pale white light, washing over everything. The back window was empty. Megan exhaled shakily, one hand pressed to her chest. She laughed. A nervous, disbelieving sound. "I'm losing my mind," she murmured, shaking her head. "Too many night shifts." She turned the key. The engine coughed to life. Then, from behind her seat, came a sound soft, wet breathing. Her entire body went rigid. Slowly, she turned her head toward the rearview mirror again. A pair of eyes stared back at her. They were wide, unblinking, reflecting the dashboard lights. A face emerged slowly from the darkness behind her seat. A pale, almost waxy face, the mouth slightly open. The figure's head tilted unnaturally to one side, its lips curling in something that wasn't quite a smile. Megan screamed. She threw herself out of the car, slamming the door behind her, and stumbled backward. The car's headlights shone directly into the windshield, and through the glass, the back seat was empty again. Her hands shook violently as she fumbled for her phone. The screen glowed to life, and she hit 911 with trembling fingers. The operator answered almost immediately. 911, what's your emergency? There's someone in my car, she cried, her voice breaking. He was right there behind me. I saw him. Ma'am, are you in a safe location? I don't know. I ran into the parking lot. He was right there, I swear. The operator's voice was calm but urgent. Stay on the line. Do not go back to your vehicle. Officers are on the way. Megan turned in a slow circle, eyes darting to every shadow. The fog was thicker now, curling low around the tires of the parked cars. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the faint buzz of a streetlight flickering out, and then a whisper came from behind her car. Megan! She froze. Every hair on her neck stood on end. She hadn't told anyone her name. She stared at the car, the headlights still cutting weakly through the fog. The rear door was slightly ajar now. She could see it hanging open just a few inches. No, she whispered. No, no, no. The whisper came again, closer this time. Megan! Her phone slipped from her trembling hands, clattering to the pavement. The operator's voice still echoed faintly through the speaker, asking if she was okay. But Megan didn't answer. She was backing away slowly, eyes locked on the car door. A figure was beginning to emerge from behind it, tall and thin, moving with a slow, deliberate grace. The face came into view, familiar, impossibly so. It was her own. Her own face stared back at her, eyes wide and hollow, skin pale as ash. The thing smiled, head twitching slightly to one side. You shouldn't have looked back, it whispered in her exact voice. Megan's scream echoed across the empty parking lot as the lights flickered once more, and then went out completely. When the police arrived 15 minutes later, they found her phone lying near her car, still connected to the dispatcher. The line was open, but all that came through was static and the faint sound of slow breathing. Her car door hung open, the engine still running, headlights dim in the thick fog. Megan was never found. But the next morning, when the fog lifted and the early shoppers arrived, several of them reported seeing something strange in the reflection of their car windows. Someone standing behind them, watching. When they turned around, no one was there. And that night, a security guard reviewing the store's camera footage froze mid-playback. The timestamp showed 12:06 a.m. The moment Megan disappeared. On the screen, he could see her car parked near the edge of the lot. The fog was thick, distorting the image slightly. She got in, sat still for several seconds, then suddenly bolted out, screaming. The guard leaned closer. Behind her, in the back seat, he saw movement. Something crawling forward, impossibly fast, a pale face pressing against the glass. Then the feed cut to black. The rain had started again, falling in thin, steady sheets that shimmered under the dim parking lot lights. The asphalt gleamed wet and black, reflecting the ghostly glow of the overhead lamps. A lone car sat at the far end, empty, engine still running, driver's door wide open. The rhythmic hum of the rain was broken only by the faint sound of static from a nearby security booth, where a monitor flickered weakly. On the screen, the footage looped, faces half seen through fog, people stepping into their cars and never stepping out again. The lot looked the same every night, but somehow it felt alive now, pulsing with unseen eyes. A gust of wind sent an empty soda can skittering across the pavement. The camera's feed glitched once more, showing a figure standing motionless under a streetlight. It was unclear if it was real or just another flicker in the static. Slowly, the figure turned toward the lens, its outline blurred by the rain. For a long, unbearable moment, it stared directly into the camera. Then, it smiled wide and silent, before fading into the darkness, leaving the parking lot empty once again. The screen went black, the hum stopped, and the lot went quiet. The parking lot was empty now, but the air still carried the echo of what had happened. The hum of dead engines, the faint smell of smoke, and that lingering chill that didn't belong to the night. A single streetlight flickered above, casting a trembling cone of yellow light over the cracked pavement. Beneath it sat an abandoned shopping cart, its shadow stretching unnaturally long, as if something unseen leaned over it. No one came here anymore. The diner was closed, the store boarded up, the cameras all dead. Locals whispered that the place was cursed, that anyone who parked there after midnight would never leave the same way. Some said they'd seen shapes moving in the fog, faces in car mirrors, faint tapping on their windows when no one was around. At 3:11 a.m., a lone car pulled in. The driver turned off the headlights, glancing around the empty lot with tired eyes. He didn't see the other cars reflected faintly in his mirrors, the ones that weren't really there. He sighed, closing his eyes just for a second. When he opened them, his reflection in the rearview mirror was smiling back at him.